I invite everybody to take your seats as we're about ready to begin. And I want to welcome those who are joining us via Zoom this morning. It's good to have you with us today. And those of you that are here at Our Savior's. Welcome to the third and final session of In Search of Shalom, Shalaam, exploring the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We're delighted today to have our two guest speakers with us, and I'll introduce them shortly. Tamar Haddad and Dr. Rod Schofield are with us this morning, as well as Rod's wife, Sherry. So welcome. It's good to have you here in person. They've been joining us via Zoom these past couple of sessions, and they're here today to share with us their personal experiences of work and life in Palestine, the Holy Land. Just a couple of quick announcements. First of all, anybody that still needs a syllabus, it has the list of books by Mitri and other resources. If you haven't received one of these yet, Beth has copies. And there are other handouts on your chair. Also, I'm going to put in a plug for Tamar's new book, The Future of Palestine, How Discrimination Hinders Change. And she's happy to autograph it for you. They're $30. And if you don't have a checkbook or cash with you, there's a kind of an IOU sign-up sheet. So you can put your name and your contact information, and I'll make sure that I get the money from you eventually, and then I'll get that to Tamar. So again, if you'd like a copy of her book and don't have the money on hand, just put your name down, take a copy, and I'll catch up with you at some point in time. But we'd love to have you take a copy home with you. I'm looking through it. It looks like a very wonderful resource with a lot of personal stories and information about life in Palestine. This summer, I don't know if you saw it, but there was an article, actually it was a full-page ad in the Seattle Times. This was around the time of the most recent conflict in the Holy Land. And it was actually June 14th. And it was you can see that, those of you that are zooming in, it says, Justice for Palestine. Ask members of the U.S. Congress to sponsor H.R. 2590 to stop our tax dollars from killing children, attacking places of worship, and violating international law. We've been talking about the situation over in Israel, Palestine, and you're going to hear firsthand this morning again from our guest speakers about what's really going on and their experiences there. So I'd like to introduce them. I'm going to introduce them together, and then we'll hear from Tamar first, then from Rod, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A with them. So born and raised in a conservative Palestinian society, Tamar Haddad learned to think critically and question the given norms. She was hugely impacted by her involvement in many phenomenal leadership programs like the MEPI Student Leaders Program, International Women Leaders, and GGIU, which led her to publish her first book, The Future of Palestine, and to start a nonprofit, YALA, Palestinian Student Leaders, that develops the leadership skills of up to 20 Palestinian undergraduates every summer in American and Palestinian academic institutions. Tamar grew up in Bethlehem, a member of Christmas Lutheran Church. And Mitri, who we heard from last Sunday, was her pastor for pretty much her whole life, and was a great influence upon her. She is a graduate of a university in Palestine, but also attended and is a graduate of California Lutheran University. And she now serves on staff at Christ Lutheran in Ferndale. Dr. Rod Schofield is also a member at Ferndale, Christ Lutheran in Ferndale, a former school administrator, past chair of the former ELCA Division of Higher Education and Schools. Rod currently serves as the ELCA representative to the School Board of the Educational Institutions of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Jordan and the Holy Land. He's a board member of Opportunity Palestine, a member of the ELCA Peace, Not Walls. Rod is a member of Christ Lutheran, as I mentioned, and he co-led a 3-year leadership training program for emerging Palestinian leaders in collaboration with the University of Colorado. So these two are incredibly gifted and knowledgeable. We are privileged to have them. Please help me welcome both Tamar and Rod.
Hello, everyone. In case you still don't know, okay, I will take off my mask. Hello, nice to be here. Thank you for having us. So I'm here to talk about my experience growing up in Palestine and what it's really like. So I was actually born in Jerusalem. And fun fact, nobody is allowed to know that I lived in Bethlehem for a while. Actually, most of my life I have lived in Bethlehem. That's why I went to Christ Lutheran Church in Bethlehem City. But if my dad, for example, or if my family knows that, you tell those people that you don't live in Jerusalem, that's a problem, because being born in Jerusalem gives you a lot of privilege. So I'm given something called a blue ID. Unfortunately, I don't have my blue ID with me right now, but it's a form of identification that the Israeli government gives to people born in Jerusalem, like Arabs born in either Jerusalem or other parts of Israel. And then if you're born in Bethlehem, which is considered the West Bank, you are given something called a green ID, which doesn't give you any privileges really at all. It means you cannot, if you are born in the West Bank, you cannot cross the checkpoints unless you apply for a certain permit that the Israeli government has to issue for you. And those permits are not really given easily. You would have to have a valid reason for that. And it can be hospitalization, mostly hospitalization, or they give them for Christians during holiday season because they know, or even for some Muslim holidays too, like Eid or Ramadan and all of that, because they know that the Israeli government would give those permits during these times because the Palestinians would just go there and just buy a lot of things because, Israel has malls and like sophisticated shops that we don't really have in Palestine. And it's like to boost Israel's economy. And they give them at very specific times. And they're actually nicer with Christians more than Muslims. Like it's more likely to get a permit if you're Christian rather than if you're a Muslim. And I'm sure Pastor Mitri told you about all of that. So like growing up as a Christian in Palestine. Also, my ID makes me way more privileged than any other Palestinian because first, yes, I do have more freedom of movement. I can cross the checkpoint, but it's not a fun thing to do every day. Like I switched between schools, either between Bethlehem, Jerusalem, just Jerusalem, Bethlehem. And it was just like a hustle because waking up so early, taking into consideration the time that you would have to spend at the checkpoint to go to your school there. And so I grew up in Lutheran schools. And when I was in the 10th grade, it was time for me to get this blue ID. So I had to move to Jerusalem just for that, like just to go to a school in Jerusalem because the schools issue those IDs for you. So I had to basically leave. And schools in Palestine are different. Like we don't have, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. No, my school was since kindergarten until you graduate. But in the 10th grade, I had to leave. I had my own community. I had my friends. And honestly, I fell into a depression phase really because like, I really liked that school and I really liked my friends. And it was just time for me to move for a political reason. And we refer to it as a political reason, but it's like to get your human rights, basically. Like I had to get that ID that gives me the freedom of movement, that gives me more access to electricity, water, to air, even like to be able to travel. And yeah, so I had to sacrifice a lot to get that ID. And I went to the new school in Jerusalem. I had to cross the checkpoint every day. And it really wasn't easy because you are literally humiliated every day at the checkpoint in order to go to your school. And that humiliation included so many things. For example, they would physically, not physically, I'm privileged. They don't do the physical check like your body, but they do it to those who have the permits. So those who have the green ID have to be physically checked in order to cross. And if you go there, you will probably have the same experience than me, but a bit better because they don't take you out of your car sometimes if you cross a bus. But if I had to go to school in a bus, they would take everyone outside the bus. If you're a foreigner, you can stay in the bus because that's not their point. They don't want to humiliate you. They want to humiliate the Palestinians. And so we would just check out of the bus and they would go in the bus, look at everything and then go up. If I go with my dad in his car, they would just open the trunk, just physically check you as if you're crossing to another country. And I had to do that for 3 years and it honestly was not fun at all. And actually I wanted to say something. Now in the past year, things have escalated really quickly in the sense that Israel doesn't care anymore. They've been confiscating land and people's houses, literally people's houses. I don't know if you've heard about Sheikh al-Jarrah. Is anyone familiar with Sheikh al-Jarrah? So yeah, so it's a neighborhood in Jerusalem where Israel just knocks on the door, says, oh yeah, we're gonna take your house, literally. Like imagine your house, you've built it your whole life, you spent your whole life there, your family is there, and then the government comes and tell you, oh, by the way, yeah, we're just gonna take your house. You either demolish it right now, or or you're gonna have to leave. And they actually pay to demolish the house. Like you would have to pay to demolish your own house that you've built your entire life. So that happened. And interestingly enough, a lot of terminology in the past half year only after Sheikh al-Jarrah incidents, which are still happening, a lot of terminology has changed. So for example, in the book, which was published in December 2020, I have used the term Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is the title or the subtitle of this session. Interestingly enough, when you call something a conflict, and that's where a lot of misinterpretation comes from, and that's where a lot of, misinformation comes from. A conflict means that there are two groups that are in conflict with each other. And that's where the term peace comes from. That's where Westerners come with the term, oh yeah, we want to help you have this peace. Well, what is this peace if there's a certain group that's literally still colonized in today's world? So the terminology has been changing. So like now we refer to it as the Palestinian struggle because a conflict makes it seem like, oh yeah, we're just fighting with some Israelis over a piece of land, which is really not the case. There has been a lot of illegal actions that has been taken by Israel. They do nothing legally, almost nothing. Technically, it is very illegal. Under humanitarian law, they break every law. And they still take land in Palestine too. So that's why they've been building settlements after the Second War, which was the Nixon War in 1967. So after that, they drew the borders and all. So they're technically not allowed to cross our borders, but they have been doing that. And they've been building settlements inside. And I wish I can show you the map right now, but if you look at Palestine before Israel came, and you look at it now, there's almost nothing left for the Palestinians. And I don't want to take a lot of time. Actually, I'm good on time. Rod will take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar, and thank you to this congregation for putting on this class and for making sure that there are authentic Palestinian voices. Last week, Mitri, today, Tamar, that makes such a difference because even though I've been over there 16 years working, there's no way I can speak to it as I think people that have lived there and worked there. If you remember last week, the last question that was asked of Mitri, and it was, what do you see the Holy Land being like in 20 years? And do you remember his response? It depends on you as well as us Palestinians. It depends on you in the United States. And so I thought, let's just look at what can we do as Lutheran Christians then to have an impact on the peace process over there. Well, one way, I'm going to talk about two things: Peace Not Walls, which is the ELCA strategy, and Opportunity Palestine, which is a nonprofit national group that supports the Lutheran schools in Palestine. Well, first, Peace Not Walls is a strategy that was developed in 2005 by the ELCA to address the issues, the struggle, not conflict, struggle. I'm learning this language too, in the Middle East. And the goal is really to achieve a safe, secure Palestinian state and a safe, secure Israel that is free from, that is at peace with its Arab neighbors. And for Palestine to have a contiguous state, and also to have a shared Jerusalem. Well, Mitri pointed out last week, and you referred to this map now, that shows Palestine as kind of a Swiss cheese, holes all over. There's no way there's going to be a contiguous Palestinian state, which is still, by the way, the US policy. So these are concerns that we have. And Peace Not Walls tries to address these concerns through what they call the 3 A's. The first one is accompaniment. We accompany people. The ELCA Global Mission purpose is not to go into countries and say, hey, we know what we can do to help you, but to go in and listen to what the people need and what they're asking for. And we've done that in Palestine. And we've asked people, what do you need? And what they say they need is for people in our country to understand, to learn, to know what the realities are, the very realities Tamar just talked about. And very few people are aware of these. So one of the things they want is for people to know and to accompany them in sharing the knowledge about the realities over there. I just want to share a couple of personal stories about accompaniment. One of the times I was over there, I was asked by Dar Kalama Lutheran School to accompany a group of 4th and 5th graders who were going to go from Bethlehem into Jerusalem. It was about 8 years ago this week, as we approached Reformation. It was for Reformation Day. And they were going to be singing at Redeemer Lutheran Church in Jerusalem. So I got on a bus and I went over with them. They had a couple of teachers. We got to the checkpoint in Bethlehem. And I experienced something I will never forget. 2 Israeli soldiers got on the bus. These are usually young people, late teens, early 20s, with their rifles. These are 4th and 5th graders. They walked down the aisle of that bus and they pointed their rifle at each and every student as they asked them for their permit. I was in the back of the bus. I could hardly believe what I was seeing and experiencing. And what was kind of sad about it, I was more traumatized, I think, than the kids because they've experienced this at checkpoints. And they've seen their parents have the rifles put to their head. So that was, for me, a very traumatic awakening. And it strengthened my resolve to want to share the story about what I've seen up there. And then several years back, my wife Sherry and I were going from Bethlehem to Jerusalem with a dear friend who lived in Bethlehem. She had a permit to enter Jerusalem. We got to the checkpoint and they said to her, sorry, you can't come in. They can, like you said, they'll treat Americans just fine. Yeah, you can go in, but not you who have a permit. who are a resident of Bethlehem and even work in Jerusalem. And Carmen, our friend, smiled and said, okay, and drove around 17 miles to another checkpoint to go in. And Sherry turned to her and said, Carmen, how is it you could smile at that checkpoint? And she said, I'm smiling on the outside, but I'm crying on the inside. And so these are the reasons we encourage people to learn more. And that leads to the second part of Peace Not Walls effort, which is to create awareness of people in this country. I so appreciate classes like this, programs like this, that give people an opportunity to learn more about the realities that exist over there. And there are many ways to increase awareness. Rick has put out some wonderful attachments in the emails that he sent out and on the materials we have with books and other things. One of the things that I realized pretty soon after I started working there is that people in this country don't realize that there are Christians in the Holy Land. They literally don't. I was walking in Jerusalem one afternoon and I saw this big tour bus come up, and I love talking to American tourists when they come over. So I went up and they were pointing out this housing development right below the street where we're at. They were proudly saying, we support that housing development, which was an Israeli settlement being built illegally on Palestinian land. And I simply said to them, well, what do you think, how do you feel about what's happening to the Christians that live there? Because there were a number of Christian families. And I'll never forget, they looked at me, Christians? There are Christians here? This was a busload of Christians from John Hagee's church in Texas. John Hagee is one of the leading proponents of Christian Zionism. And he brings people over there to talk about, well, I won't get into all he talks about, but he doesn't tell them, these are Christians that we're moving out. We're moving them out by encouraging Israeli settlements. Probably the most important thing that I think we can do is to go over there, encourage people to visit. How many of you have been over to the Holy Land? Okay, about a third. I encourage you, really encourage you to consider taking a trip over there. And if you do, going with a Christian tour company that has Christian guides, so that you can really get, I think, a pretty balanced look at the situation. Opportunity Palestine, the group that I work with, will be sponsoring another tour in January of 2022. And we will be taking people not only to all the holy sites, the places people want to see, but we will be visiting the Lutheran schools and the Lutheran churches and meeting with the Lutheran bishop over there, so you can get a feel for what we are doing to support and accompany our Palestinian Christian sisters and brothers. And I've left out my cards over on that table. If you are interested, you can take my card, you can send me an email, I'll put you on the list to receive information about the time and the place when we get all the details put together. But that's one way to increase awareness. The third thing Peace Not Walls does is advocacy. And that means really standing up for the human rights of Palestinians, as well as the right for Israel to be safe and secure. Unfortunately, what Israel is doing, what their government is doing, is not going to lead them to a safe and secure place. And there are many, many Israeli leaders in this country and over there that are pointing this out, raising this up. So how can we advocate right now? Rick held up this one page from the Seattle Times. That HR, I'm going to get the exact number right there. HR 2590, House Bill 2590 is currently under consideration by Congress, and it states, as Rick pointed out, that the U.S. will not fund the Israeli government's imprisonment, and torture of Palestinian children. And it will not support the theft and destruction of Palestinian homes and property and further annexation of Palestinian land. Interestingly, 4 or 5, maybe 6, 7 years ago, our former ELCA Bishop, Mark Hansen, joined 15 other Christian leaders in the United States in a very forceful letter to Congress, and saying that we have to make our aid to Israel conditional on their abiding by our US existing laws as well as international law. We currently give $3.8 billion. I have to hesitate when I think of $1 billion a year in foreign aid, Israel, primarily in military aid. Israel is the only democratic country in the world that detains children in military detention with no right to legal counsel. 96% of children have no parent present during interrogation. And in fact, children are taken from their homes and their parents are not notified as to where they're going to be, sometimes for 2 weeks to a month. I have met with children who have been in imprisonment. And what they have shared with me is so unbelievable. I even hesitate to share it publicly sometimes, but it is the worst possible conditions they've experienced. That is why in Congress, we have several representatives that every year introduce legislation that says, wait a minute, can we not make our aid conditional, our aid to Israel conditional on the basis of them following existing US and international law? So one thing we can do, call, write, email our representatives and simply say, would you please support House Bill 2590? Okay, that's one thing I would ask. One of the things that a Israeli leader in our country, Mark Braverman, a Jew who has said, we need to break the silence of what is happening over there. And he made an interesting comment the other day. He said to a national conference, it's the churches. The churches are going to create the tipping point where our country is going to finally say, wait a minute, we can't unconditionally continue to support oppression of the rights of another people. And I found that so dramatic. He said, it's the churches around the country, ecumenical, all churches, who are saying, we understand now and we want to support the rights of people in Palestine. Okay, then the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Jordan and the Holy Land is small but mighty. That's the way to describe it. And they have had a real influence throughout the Middle East. They created an inter-religious dialogue in their schools that has become a model for schools throughout the Middle East. We've had our people, Nassar, who's the principal of Dar al-kalina, speak throughout the Middle East about how to create interfaith dialogue between Jewish, Muslim, and Christian people. So that's something they do along with a whole lot of other wonderful things. And I thought one way to point you with the schools is to show a video. It's a 5-minute video that just shows a couple of students and staff talking about what the schools mean to them. So.
One question came from the chat from Mark and Eddie. Do our senators and Congress people support this bill? Washington State's senators, Congress.
That's a good question, and we'll address that then when I'm finished, when both of us are. But that we'll start with that. Okay, we'll show the video.
I find the life here to be very interesting and fun. Our teachers here are amazing because they always support us and they're always there for us no matter what. And if we want them outside of school, they always give us a chance to contact them, like if we need help with our studies. It's just like a big, huge family. I love them all, honestly. Yeah. Here we have a lot of chances to travel in this school. Like we have in 11th grade, we have the class trip to Germany, and the DEPCA team, they travel usually every 3-4 years, one time. And when we go out and show people what our Palestinian traditional dance is, which is DEPCA, they know that, there are still Palestinians on this land.
In our school, we have from the 4th grade the environmental club in Talita Kumi in Beit Jala. They come to our school, they do a lot of activities about the environment. There's a special thing here in Palestine, which is the Palestinians love the agriculture, they love the trees, they love the environment a lot. Also, as a Palestinians, we know that the earth is like our sons and our daughters, so they are same equal. If you tell the Palestinian you have to choose between your land, your trees, and your home, they will say, no, I'll take my land and my trees, I do not need my home. Our school gives us lots of motivation and these things that help us to do these activities.
My school, the School of Hope, is really one of a kind. It's really special. It offers, first of all, it has a very healthy environment with its teachers, students, and administration to encourage students not only to focus on their curricular activities, but also the extracurricular. So we actually take in grade 10 one class a week about the future careers and what can one study in the future, so he can earn a good salary and also be happy about oneself. Actually, my math teacher this year, he's new in the school, but he's really a wonderful teacher. It's really a wonderful school. In terms of studying and in terms of activities.
I have been studying at al-kalina since 2014. The teachers are great. There is George Abudinen, it's a teacher, helped me a lot. That will be an honor to be like him. Yeah. I love him so much. If there is any questions or there is anything I need, I can ask him.
It's the extracurriculars that we have. We have arts, we have sports, we have music. Really helps us because not all of us have the money to go to places where we can learn to play instruments or to play our sports that we like or to draw or anything. And it's given to us free. You don't have to pay anything for it. So it's given to you on a plate and you just have to accept it. My teachers, my Arabic and English teacher, they both are the ones who wanted me to be in the council at first and wanted me to be the president. I'm the first female president for the school in a really long time. These two teachers, they're really good people, and I always find them as shoulders, like the adults' shoulders I can lean on. If I become a leader who's a lady in the future, I can be a role model to the kids who are younger than me.
So I'm just going for the tawjihi and getting a good mark so that I can have a wide range of options that I can choose from. When you go for something that you are passionate about, you can be the best in your field.
So just a final comment about the schools. This young lady said it's given to us free. Well, their parents pay tuition. They have to. And one of the ways we support schools is to offer scholarships to families that cannot afford that. And Opportunity Palestine is a group that was started by ELCA representatives in this country who have been over there and visited schools. And so we provide information. If you go to the webpage, you'll be able to see videos and links to student activities, and it's kind of entertaining and fun. So I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to look at Opportunity Palestine. And now I encourage you to ask questions. So Tamar, come on up here. And while you are, let me just start with that first answer to that first question. And it had to do with our Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota. Our Washington delegation. In fact, it's a Minnesota representative, Betty McCollum, who has introduced this legislation and has for several sessions of Congress. I've been in contact with our congressional representative, Suzanne Delvini, and she indicates support for it. She hasn't come out specifically supporting this legislation, but says, I support the peace process. And she goes into a lot of general statements. I've met with her in town halls. She is one of the more cautious people about, I don't know how far I can go with this. And part of the reason that people are cautious in Congress is one of the largest lobbies in the United States, and I'll bet a lot of you don't know this, is called AIPAC, American Israeli Political Action Committee, I think it's called. They have an unbelievable influence on Congress. And people that retire from Congress, that's when they write the books and that's when they tell the story. So people have to be cautious, because if they come out too strongly, they might lose some support. However, there's a growing support in this country for Palestinian human rights that we believe will lead to a safe, secure Israel, which is something we also want. So with that, we'll open it up to questions for you or from the chat.
Yeah. You want to be on the screen too?
Oh, on the screen? No, I think you look a lot better on the screen than I do, right?
Yes.
Are there other Christian groups, denominations that are actively working like the Lutherans are? Yes, are we affiliated?
That's a very good question. The answer is yes. Almost every Protestant denomination has a Palestinian Israeli peace group operating in their denomination. The Presbyterian Church has taken that Kairos document that we talked about last time and put together a wonderful 3-session series based on that document that we use now in our churches. So the Presbyterian Church, the Methodists have done it, UCC, pardon? Baptist, yes, right. Baptist, Mennonites. I'd say practically every denomination is active right now in advocating for peace in the Middle East. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you work with the Tent of Nations also.
Yeah. Have you been to the Tent of Nations?
No, I have not, but I do go over to the Presbyterian Church, and we have a group of us that are working on things. Yeah. We have a number that have gone over there with a Presbyterian minister.
Yeah, you know about Tent of Nations.
Yeah,
Why don't you
actually,
share a little bit about that.
You've seen him in the video. He's the director of the al-kalina school right now. Tony Nassar, yeah, he's I've never been actually,
really?
But I know that yeah, they've been taking their land from them, and they try so hard to keep it. I'm actually, you probably know more than me, because that's just one story amongst a million other stories, you know, but they're good about sharing it with like your type of audience. So that's good. But really, it's just they've been holding up really well. I don't know how they do it. I think it's because of the US support with that, like the people who visit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's one of the very rare places where they're actually maintaining their land. Because other places, Israel will just come and just take it, but because they've turned it into like a kind of a touristic place for, U.S. citizens and stuff like that, it just makes it easier to keep that land.
And one of the really neat things at 10 Nations, and right now it is totally surrounded by Israeli roads and blockades. They are literally trying to move them off the land, which their families had for like 400 years. They even have legal documents showing it's their land. And yet Israel's trying to get rid of them because they're in the way of settlement activity. But this family that owns this land has a big rock right at their entrance. And on the rock is stated, "We refuse to be enemies." And that is probably what I think is the most amazing thing about their resilience and their resistance. We've been there. We've been there a couple of years ago. We had to walk over the blockade to get in. And we saw what is happening around them. And those of us that were there were thinking, if that was us, we would be so angry, upset, trying to find a way to get back. These people maintain a peaceful nature, even with all of this going on. And they say, we're not going to get caught up in that eye for an eye, get back. We refuse to be enemies, but we're going to hold on as long as we can to what we have. And when I've asked them many times, how do you do this? How do you manage? They've come back with two things. Our faith and our families are what keep us going. So glad you brought up the 10 Nations.
Karen, can you repeat that again? That question statement you said people online cannot hear you.
Oh, I wasn't sure. Are you
Talk
talking?
to that mic.
Oh, there's a mic.
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Well, it's called Tent of Nations. And Tent of Nations. And a number of Presbyterian groups go over there and help in the fields, the olive trees and the other things they have around there. And David comes to the United States and he has spoken.
I know him. He goes to my church.
Yeah.
And he did go to the Christmas Tree Lutheran Church.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I know he does that, which is really like, we have to do that, it's a big responsibility for Palestinians to do it. But I just this idea came across my mind, actually. I never thought about it that way. So imagine there are no Christian Palestinians. I don't think any of you would have taken an interest. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm humanized because I'm Christian. But if I wasn't, I feel like that we wouldn't get the support that we usually do. And I thought this is just an idea that I should share. Like, yeah, why do I have to speak at churches? Why only people at churches will understand me? Whereas if I was just like Muslim, for example, because of Islamophobia and other things, we were talking about that. So it's just a point to get across.
Yeah, that's true. And yet we think it is so important to maintain the Christian presence in the Holy Land. And yet the bishops over there have real concern that if this occupation continues much longer, there will be no Christians left in the Holy Land. That's the bishops of many of the Christian denominations in the Holy Land. And their concern is people will go over and all we will see are empty Christian museums, sites, Christian museums with no Christian presence. That's really a legitimate concern on the part of many Christians over there. So that's partly what drives, I think, our churches. But your point is well taken.
Yeah.
The majority of people are Muslim. And who is speaking for them? Well, fortunately, more and more are speaking for them. But we've got Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people living in our Holy Land.
Yeah.
And our goal, Peace Not Walls, and all of us that are involved, our goal is to eventually have them live in peace with one another, free of fear. That's our goal.
There's another way of pressuring it too. I imagine Israel would love to have Western money. And
They do.
Visiting there, money in the country. And let their position be known to them. And they will encourage it. And if there is pressure to have equality of freedom of rights and everything, it'll have a certain amount of pressure. And you can parallel this with a situation in Germany after World War II. Mary Ann's folks came over in the 1920s from Germany. She has relatives there. Half of them are behind what was the Iron Curtain. And she visited there back 55 years ago. I didn't visit until in the 60s, 70s actually. But the difference from when she first visited and the attitude of the East Germans and the Russian influence, and when I went there, it was completely changed. And then the unification came, and she could see movement, personal rights, freedoms come back in, and the joy that the Germans had when the unification came. And this is hope for a situation here. So be encouraged.
Yeah, I hope so. To be honest, I don't have any hope, at least not now. It's hard to see it, taking into consideration how Israel is just so embedded in there. It's just so hard, and they have way more control than we will ever have, because of so many different reasons. But I still have some hope. I hope so, like maybe not in the near future, but in the far future. I just think it's very, not because of all the politics involved, but really because of the human rights aspect of it. And there is like this occupation has been so normalized. And it's funny because he said we go to the bus and he saw the rifles pointed at the children's heads. It probably happened to me. I don't even like remember to say that. It's like not important because it's so normal. Like, oh, what do you mean? Like that's okay, It's become so normalized, and unfortunately, people don't know in Palestine that it's so wrong. Yeah, there's a question.
When I was there, I had rifles pointed at a mom sitting next to me. She was a Western going to East Germany. She had 3 little kids with her, and the guards came in with guard dogs and looked everywhere in the train and pointed the gun, not at me, because I had an American mask on, but they took her and strewn it through the entire cabin. She had to pick it all on herself. Yeah, they were really tough. Now, the East and Western have emerged in the last 20, 30 years. And there's still a feeling of, we are under communist rule for 50 years almost. You owe us something, okay? But everything east was banned, and so they threw it all out. And even though they had free childcare, the West came in, and now they're paying for childcare. So they didn't know very well, but it was kind of like a Western takeover, because everything's better, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in Germany, and I went through those checkpoints and stuff. That's nothing compared to Israel. Absolutely nothing. I'm the most terrified. Probably one of the times that I was most terrified was with Karen and another lady going from Ramallah back to Bethlehem. And that checkpoint is a few steps up from the one from Bethlehem. To walk through that was this bunker, and you had to get off the bus. You had to get through there, and you had to get on another bus to go back. That was, I still have nightmares about.
We were just talking about that last night.
You never saw anybody, you only heard voices and stuff. And but my hope for it is almost to nothing.
Yeah, because you've seen it.
We really thought there was hope. And Obama came out and so on. There was a lot of things happening. But since then, I think it has deteriorated because of all the fervor and all the misconceptions, all the misinformation. One ad in the Seattle Times isn't going to do anything.
Right.
And it's just, yeah, I really don't see anymore. I'm going back, by the way, in March, but I'm going on a different route. Before I was a Presbyterian. And it's going to be very different because everything is going to be pro-Israeli. I don't think I already know that. But my husband, who hasn't been there, is a former military man. And he says, well, maybe then you get to see the other side. I said, I'd love to see the other side. We actually did that. But he's already, he doesn't disbelieve me, but he also thinks it's, I don't like it.
Well, can I make a suggestion? When you're over there, ask someone to talk about the group called Breaking the Silence, which is Israeli Defense Force people who have left the military and decided to speak out, using their word, not mine, the atrocities that are created by the Israeli military. So breaking the, seriously, ask, there's a large group and they know about it over there. They know about it. One of the things that has given me hope, I just thought of this too. There's a group called Parent Circle in which Jewish and Palestinian families get together and their common interest is they have lost a child in the struggle. A child has been killed because of the struggle. They've come together to say, we have to stop this. We have to dialogue, communicate together. And when I attended one of their meetings and I remember, and I said, how is it you can do this? And this one woman said, when you have tasted the tears of another, there is no longer any conflict. We really are together. Those kind of things give me hope. One of the things that, when you talk about reconciliation, the big struggle right now is between, do we create one state or two states or some other mechanism? Our US policy holds on to a two-state solution. And we, as ELCA, also support a two-state solution, even though most people now say, that's not possible. There's got to be another way. The reason Israel resists a one-state solution is if that happens, they will be in the minority in terms of people voting. They cannot be a democratic state and be one state and still have control. So they're resisting that, and yet they destroyed the possibility for a two-state solution by the settlement activity and other things.
Yeah. I was just going to say that there's actually a story. I interviewed an Israeli friend that I met in one of the leadership programs at Georgetown University, and she served in the military, and she just couldn't take it anymore, and she had to leave or just say, oh yeah, I actually have some, it's affecting my mental health. So she found her way out of it. So there's a lot of people who serve in the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces, and they just can't do it because they're actually forced to. And sometimes they even force some Palestinians with an Israeli passport to do that. Now, because I was born in Jerusalem, I am automatically given a Jordanian passport, even though I'm not Jordanian. But there are some Palestinians who apply for the Israeli passport because it just gives them even more privileges, who are born Okay, actually, if you're born in the Israeli parts, you're automatically given an Israeli passport as a Palestinian. And yeah, I remember my cousin was forced to serve in the military, who is very Palestinian, but they had to go to court in order to stop them from doing that. Like, imagine serving in the military against your own people. It's just crazy, like, beyond imagination.
Yeah. Back here.
What's the United Nations position on the struggle?
Oh my God, don't get me started. No, it's very unfortunate. Sorry.
Again, what's the United Nations position on the struggle?
So actually, Palestine is considered an observer state among only two countries are non-observer states in the UN. I'm sorry, I forgot the second one, but Palestine is one of them. So basically, it has no say in anything. You can attend like the UN General Assemblies and all of that, but you have no say. That's one. Second of all, I actually went to the UN and I wanted to raise this question, and I did, and they just try to shut it down. It's something they don't want to talk about, and they can't, in a way. Like, they're very discreet about it, and they can't do anything because of all the support that the US, for example, gives to Israel because of so many different reasons.
I think, yeah, that's a good question. The United Nations passes many resolutions saying Israel must stop
Yeah.
the illegal
Actually, no, wait. Yeah, they do that now, but the UN was the main reason why Israel is in existence today.
Mhm.
They thought the resolution, I forgot the number, but one of the resolutions allowed for a Jewish state in Palestine, which was later called Israel, and so it was because of the UN, and they thought that, we're doing it for a good reason. I understand, because of the Jews who were persecuted in Europe and all of that after World War II. But then they created a bigger issue, and I really don't know, were they aware of it at all? Because they actually, the Jews who came in big immigration ships to Palestine during the British Mandate, which was right before Israel, they had no idea that there were people living there. And they didn't tell them that. They thought, we're just going to this open land and everything is going to be given to us. They actually had no idea that there were people living there. And we even had some Jewish tribes, like Jewish Palestinian people, who are now not speaking up at all because they're persecuted by both Israel and Palestinians, because Palestinians say, they're Jewish, that they support Israel. But I actually came across one, and it's rare for them to say, I'm a Jewish Palestinian. And so I asked this question. So what do you think of the struggle? He's like, I'm 100% against everything that Israel does.
What I also wanted to point out too, you're right, that was a good contextual history for how this happened. But since then, the United Nations has passed many resolutions criticizing Israel's activity. And the reason they don't go anywhere is because the United States joins Israel in voting against it.
Yeah. The
only time they didn't do that was during the Obama administration, when a resolution came forth and the US abstained. That's as close as we've come. And of course, Obama and John Kerry got blasted like crazy for abstaining and saying we won't support a resolution saying that Israel has to follow international law in dealing with the people that they're occupying. So that is really the reason that the United Nations has not been able to do a whole lot other than pass what are now meaningless resolutions. So anyway, good question.
This is a major problem throughout history. Here in America, before the white men came, there were tribes that, because of famine or overhunting or whatever, they moved into an area where other tribes were, and they took over. The Anastasia all of a sudden disappeared. Was it because someone else moved in on their territory? And we're seeing this everywhere throughout history. And so reaction and everything is terrible. I don't know the answer except
Well, there is a parallel, isn't it? You know, when the Europeans came to this country, there were people here. And we displaced them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the parallel that we're talking about, where the European Jews came thinking that there was going to be this open land available to them in the Holy Land, but there were people that had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. We want to thank both Tamar and Rod for
Thank
being
you.
here. Enriching time we've had. It's been very informative. We're grateful for not only your presence, but for the continued work that both of you do in advocacy for the Palestinian people. And we trust that it has enlivened our awareness and hopefully motivated us to also be advocates with you. Again, I want to encourage you to think about purchasing a copy of Tamar's book. Again, if you don't have any cash or checks with you, put your name and contact information. I'll track you down and get the money to Tamar. But please help yourself to a book, and she's happy to stand at the table and sign it afterwards. There's also some cards of Rod's and other information in case you're interested in finding out more about the tour that's going to happen in January, or you want to talk to Rod. He's up in Ferndale. He'd be happy to continue the conversation with you. And we want to thank you for being part of these 3 sessions. Thank you for being with us. God bless. Have a good week.
Thank you, Marco.
And thanks to Marco. Blessings to all of you tuning in today. Blessings to you as well.